Hello, welcome to Money Matters on TV360 in Nigeria. I am Adeshewa Odushoga. As Nigeria struggles to deal with the economic shocks caused by the advent of the coronavirus pandemic, the inflation rate have again spiked, and this time to 12.82%, the highest in 27 months. Now, the National Bureau of Statistics revealed this in its Consumer Price Index report for July 2020. The recent inflation figure is 0.26% higher than the rate recorded in June 2020, which stood at 12.56%. The report also shows that Nigeria's inflation has consistently increased for 11 months, rising from 11.02% in August 2019 to 12.82% in July 2020. The Composite Food Index rose by 15.48% in July 2020 compared to 15.18% in June 2020. This represents 0.34% increase compared to June figures. Also, on a month-to-month basis, the food sub index increased by 1.52% in July 2020, up by 0.04% points from 1.48% recorded in June 2020. On month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 1.25% in July. This is 0.04% rate higher than the rate recorded in June, which is 1.21%. The urban inflation rate increased by 13.40% year-on-year in July from 13.18% recorded in June, while the rural inflation rate increased by 12.28% in July from 11.99% in June. Now let's examine states which were worst hit by the inflation. We have Bauchi leading the charts with 16.10%, followed by Kogi State with 15.90%, Sokoto and Plateau with 15.20%, and Ebonyi State with 15%. On the other hand, Lagos 10.70%, Adamawa 10.60%, and Kwara State with 10.50% recorded the slowest rise in the headline year-on-year inflation. In terms of food inflation on year-on-year basis, Kogi State recorded 20.09%, which was recording the highest, followed by Sokoto State 19.28% and Plateau State 18.05%, while Adamawa, which recorded 13.37%, Abia 13.33%, and Lagos 13.13% recorded the slowest rise this month. Now, Nigeria's inflation has consistently been on the rise despite the naira devaluation, which is affecting the price of consumables. The move to increase the country's value-added tax from 5% to 7.5%, and the coronavirus pandemic, which has affected global oil prices. With all of these economic challenges in place and the looming recession, what is in place for Nigeria's economy, and what is the survival level of the common man? I won't be doing this alone. Now, joining me to discuss this is economic analyst Robert Omotunde, who will be joining me via Skype. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, Mr. Omotunde, all these figures, the inflation now at 12.82% from 12.56% recorded in June. What do you think is responsible for the increase? I mean, this is the highest in 27 months.
Yes, of course it's the highest. And if you notice, since the beginning of the year, we have consistently recorded that creeping inflation. Inflation has been creeping up since the beginning of the year. At some point earlier in the year, you will notice that we had inflation at 11% levels. Right now, we are talking about 12% levels. And very soon, most likely by August, by the time we see August inflation, we will most likely be hitting the 13% levels. And we still expect that it might get worse. The coronavirus pandemic, is also taking a toll on what is feeding into the general price level. We have this particular one, rising across major lines that is reported for the individual consumption by purpose according to MBS classification. Now, food inflation is very major, and you will notice that it accounts for the larger chunk of the consumer price index. I think about 50.7% of that basket. So what that means is that once food prices are rising, then you also see the impact on the headline inflation. To be very specific, we've also seen that the recent naira depreciation across major market lines have also impacted on imported inflation, which currently now is also rising and also feeding into the broader food index, which is then now impacting on the headline inflation. Now, a couple of other issues from the energy space, the fact that recently we've seen that reduction in pump price of petrol. This was around the time when we had increases in, reduction in global oil prices. Now, with oil prices recovering and exchange rate depreciation coming in, we are likely going to see adjustment of that pump price. As we adjust the pump price, it's going to also impact on the prices for energy products, and this will also invariably just affect the headline inflation. So inflation is not looking good at this time in terms of even expectation for price rises. You're likely going to see this rise. There are other concerns that could also further impact, the fact that the current depreciation that we've seen on the exchange rate, we may have not seen the full effect. The full effect might still come in by the time we see further convergence between the parallel market and the current investors and exporters window. Now, when that happens, we are also likely going to see the effects on the headline inflation. And lastly, the other line that we are likely to see is the increase in electricity tariff. Remember, in 2016, one of the factors that contributed to the high level of inflation, which almost hit 19% in 2016 during the recession, was the fact that we had increase in electricity tariff. Now, if this comes into effect, National Assembly has postponed more or less the evil day by saying delay it to 2021. If that happens, that's good. That means the inflation expectation will be for 2021. But if not, it means that we are still going to see more impact from the increase in electricity tariff, which is very major. Energy contributes close to 15% of the CPI, which is the consumer price index. So it's not good days for general price level in the system.
Now, let's look at the unemployment rate. With the current unemployment population at 13.9 million naira, 13.9 million, I must say, what does this make for an average Nigerian with fixed income who cannot possibly, afford a fixed price and an increase in the price of consumables?
Yeah, it's double whammy for an average person within the economy. Unemployment is another issue. Remember, we don't have this data for close to 2 years now, because the last time we had it was sometime Q3, third quarter of 2018. Now we've seen this data for Q2 of 2020, and it's not any exciting. Unemployment at 27.1%, and then if you look at underemployment rates, that one is also at 28%, 28.6%. So if you combine the two, you'll find out that the unemployment and underemployment rate gives you about 55.7%. Now, to make it worse, remember we were just talking about inflation. Now, inflation at 12.8%, compared to unemployment and underemployment at 55.7%. If you add those two, we are talking about what economists call the misery index. That is how miserable is an individual within an economy. You have an unemployment that is 55%. I'm saying 55% because the underemployment rate means that people's productive capacity are not fully utilized. So at 55%, 5.7%, and then inflation at 12.8%. We're talking about almost 69% of misery index. That is horrible for any country. So it's not any good. And then to know that when you disaggregate this number, you now see youth unemployment, at closer to about 32%. It's not exciting for an economy that has a median age of 18 to 19%, meaning that 50% of our population are below the age of 19. And what that means is that over the next couple of years, say in the next 10 to 15 years, all of these guys are also going to join the labor force. Now we have a ticking time bomb, and if we don't want it to explode in our very eye, we need to start taking actions right now. In the next 10 to 15 years, do we have enough jobs for the teeming population? Because don't forget, unemployment is only analyzing, the productive capacity of a country in terms of people that are willing and able to work, who are in the labor force. And the number, as I speak today, is only about 86 or thereabout million people of our 200 million population. Now, when you have a situation where we now have a median age of 19, meaning 50% is about 100 million, can we accommodate over the next 10 to 15 years another 100 million people joining the labor force? And in the next 10 to 15 years, most of the guys that you have in that 86 million will still be active, will still be active, meaning that there will still be a potential labor force. So now imagine an average of another 100 million joining that number. It means that we're going to have a labor force that will be close to about 150 million people. Are we ready to provide jobs for these 150 million people in the next 10 to 15 years? Now, these are the critical questions that the policymakers need to start asking, and we need to start taking action. Because if we don't do that, what is going to happen is that the survival instinct in people will then make them to now start taking to other things in order to survive. Crime will be on the increase, armed robbery, 419, and all sort of, basically of the situation we have a failed state. The security apparatus of government can be overwhelmed in even stemming, the escalating rate of crime. Definitely, this is not what we want in our hands. So now is the time to start acting. And what do we need to do? It is beyond the rhetoric of government saying, I want to create jobs. We need to get really into action. And for us to get into action, what it means is that the government itself must begin to create enabling environment that is good enough to create jobs. Now, it is not something the government can do or fix on its own. When government tells you we want to create 10 million jobs, I do not expect that those 10 million jobs will be jobs that are within the civil service. Because how many people do you actually need to run the civil service? Already as it is now, it looks overbloated. So, but in creating 10 million jobs, what it should be is that government is creating the enabling environment so that the individual, individual businesses, so to speak, the private sector can now create those jobs that will then help mental dream to saying we want to create more jobs. So definitely, this is an area that we need to begin to focus on over the next couple of years, so that we don't have, this crisis exploding in our very own eye.
Mr. Motunde, please permit me to hold your thoughts right there.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll take a pause now and we will go on a short break. Don't go away. Corruption not in my country.
Hello, Alahaji. Right now I'm in Abuja. No. Hello, Adamu. Right now I'm in Kano. Yes. When I get back, I will just call you. Look, what is wrong with you? I'm talking on the phone and you are gesticulating and doing. What's wrong with you?
Daddy, where exactly are we as we speak?
Are you alright? This is Lagos.
Well, you just lied to someone that we're in Abuja.
Keep quiet there. Who told you can tell an elderly person is lying?
Daddy, you just lied. And by lying, you're raising corrupt children for the future of Nigeria. That is corruption, not in my country. Corruption not in my country.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we were just analyzing the inflationary rate, which was just released by the National Bureau of Statistics, standing at 12.82%. And I've been discussing with Robert Omotunde. Thank you for starting by, Mr. Omotunde. Let me ask you, amidst these inflationary pressures, the federal government is seeking to increase its value-added tax from 5% to 7.5%. And if you agree with me, this, of course, would have a significant effect on prices. Do you think this is the best time to implement this policy?
Well, I mean, it's a very difficult time for the government as well. Now, the reason for this is because we are at a phase where revenue fundamentals of government are so weak. Remember, this is an economy that is being run on oil. And since the COVID-19 pandemic started, we've been seeing a lot of pressure on the global oil prices. Right now, I mean, we saw it dropping as low as, close to $32 before picking up. And as we speak, it's currently around $45 a barrel. Now, the revenue of government is not also as strong. And we are also trying to, tell the government to diversify away from oil. So if government is not going to depend on oil, the other alternative is for the government to tax the citizen. And one of the ways to get revenue from taxes is to tax consumption. Because Nigeria, as we speak today, is a consuming economy. Now, if you look at our GDP and you disaggregate it, consumption accounts for close to 60 to 70% of our GDP. Now, what this means is that if the government wants to rein in more taxes, a good way of doing it is to tax consumption. And taxing consumption can give you even much more revenue than you will get if you decide to go ahead and target people's income, because we're a low-income country, as a matter of fact. Now, but the point then is, what is the best time to, for government to diversify away? I don't think there is the best time rather than now. Now, the truth is that it's going to put pressure on, consumer prices, so to speak, because you're taxing consumption. But I think one ingenious thing the government did was also to say there are some essential food items that are going to be excluded from the value-added tax increase. So the 7.5% as we speak today excludes some food items, essential food items such that people need, to get by. Now, it is in the interest of the government to now start implementing the appropriate usage of the proceeds of these taxes. Otherwise, it will be, more problem for the people. Now, you don't tax people more, and people don't see the effect of this increased taxation in more infrastructure. Because if you create more infrastructure, then you create more enabling environment for people to work harder, to even be ingenious to create, things that can generate a lot of income so that you can have more money to tax. But it will be foolhardy of government, again, to now tax people the more, making people poorer, and then not use those taxes in the right way. Because not using them in the right way, if you use those taxes to fund consumption, is as good as these problems will keep increasing. So, I think the way to look at it is to say government, then citizens also should begin to get government accountable. We are not at that phase yet as a nation where we put government on their toes and to say, this is what we want. We are not good at that, because we've been spoiled a lot by the oil economy such that people do not care. Whether they steal money or they don't steal money, most Nigerians do not bother about it. But when we pay taxes and each citizen is paying through his nose, then you will get much more interested in what the proceeds of those taxes are used for by the government. And I think it is when we get to that point that we begin to become, even responsible citizens, to get our leaders to account for those funds. And then it can help us reduce some of the pressure. If those taxes can help create an environment that creates more jobs, more people get employed, unemployment reduces, everybody is happy at the end of the day. And I think that is the way we should begin to look at issues from.
Now, it is no doubt many analysts had already posited that there is a looming recession. Let me ask, how bad can things get compared to 2016?
Well, I think that recession looks almost unavoidable right now. How bad it will get in 2016, the worst of the dip that we suffer was around minus 2.5% or thereabout. We never got to 3%. in terms of the dip. But if you look at what we have seen in other developed economies, even economies that are even more sophisticated than the Nigerian economy. See, look at the US economy, for example. We saw a quarterly dip, in the double digits almost in the double digits for the US economy, in Q2 to be specific. Now, what that means is that by the time we are seeing our Q2 GDP data, it's no doubt that it's almost going to be negative. But how deep it will get, it's something that is still not clear, especially given that somewhat the economy finds a way to be resilient. In all of these, agricultural output, may still get some increases. We are in a situation where the service sector of the economy, accounts for the bulk of our GDP, over 50% of our GDP. Now, when you look at this, the service sector of the economy is majorly dominated by telecommunication services. And look at the sector that has benefited the most in this so-called lockdown COVID pandemic has been the telecommunication sector of the economy. So this may create a little bit of buffer for our economy, such that we won't suffer that significant dip, but that we won't have a negative is almost impossible, because we will expect that the manufacturing sector will dip. We expect that maybe agriculture may, sustain a little bit of performance, but the oil sector and the service sector, will still expect, some negative performance, which will then lead to that dip. But, for us to suffer or to be declared as being in recession officially, Q2 GDP has to come in negative and Q3 has to come in negative as well. That is when we are officially in a recession. So even if you see a negative GDP by Q2, we are still not in recession technically until Q3 report comes out and shows that the economy has contracted. So, but fingers are crossed. What government has been trying to do is to see how they can reduce the impact, so that it's not going to be as significant as what we had in 2016. And I think some good steps that have been made has been, allowing currency to adjust as all of these realities are staring us in the face. Because in 2016, one of the, woes of that period was that the central bank did not allow the currency to move when it should have moved. And that further compounded the level of recession that we suffered. But this time around, they've been very proactive, as the cases demanded. They've been moving the exchange rate, and I think this may give us a little bit of buffer, by the time the figures are out.
Now let me ask you, do you think the coronavirus pandemic worsened the inflationary rates, considering the fact that inflation had been on the rise even before COVID-19?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you notice, the rising inflation was not only, was not induced, so to speak, by COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic has only contributed to it. There were a lot of pressure points that we could identify, even before COVID-19 came. One of which was that food prices were rising. We expected that energy prices were going to rise by the time, subsidy is removed. But that, again, has not been as significant as we would expect, because oil prices have also moderated, between since the beginning of the year until now, But again, COVID-19 has added to the problems, because we are now seeing a situation where farm activities are now at a minimal, level, because, people have to stay at home. Maybe farmers couldn't get as much seedlings as they should be able to get. The minimal activities, that is going on the farm is also going to impact, and those are some of the pressure we're seeing on food prices at the moment. So definitely, we had our own issue with inflation even before COVID-19 started. It has only just added to the problems.
All right, finally, before I let you go, what do you think the Nigerian government is not doing enough? Before we got into this situation, there are a lot of economic challenges in place. What do you think the Nigerian government is not doing enough?
Well, I think it's a third world country, and a frontier economy. At every point in time, we are predisposed to challenges, especially as it relates to international commodity prices, because we are also highly dependent on that. So government can never get to the point where they feel fulfilled that they've done enough, because even in developed economies, we see government striving to, be better every day. For our own country, we've had our own policy, misalignment, policy issues, things that we are supposed to address that we don't address in good time, and all of these are compounding some of the issues that we are facing right now. But I think the lesson for government is that we should not wait until there is a crisis before we begin to act, because those are some of the issues we've seen that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed into. Look at the health sector and how dilapidated the facilities or infrastructure in that space has been. Now, COVID-19 has only exposed it to government, but it shouldn't even get to that point. Government should have a holistic plan towards developing every sector of the economy, so that when issues like this come up, we will have the buffer to be able to withstand some of the storms. But definitely government cannot do enough. They have to keep striving, until we get better.
All right, Mr. Martin, thank you very much for speaking to us. And we also hope that things get better for the GDP in Q2 and Q3 subsequently. We don't want to go into recession.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
And that's how much we can take on the program. Do watch us again on our YouTube channel at TV360 Nigeria, and do follow us across all of our social media platforms at TV360 Nigeria. Thank you very much for watching. I am Adeshawa Udushoga. Bye for now.